Hello everyone, my name is Zhenya, and this is a continuation of my video game diary, in which I talk about the experience of fully completed games, which is really rare for me since I very rarely complete things in life. And this time, as you can see from the title, we will talk about my 9th completed game, namely Neighbours From Hell, which in various localizations for different countries has alternative titles, like How to Get the Neighbor Mad for post-Soviet region, or simply Get the Neighbor. And although I tried to play it before in my childhood and youth, the full playthrough I managed to follow through only recently, starting at the end of July 2021, then taking a break for the first Doom and Stalker Clear Sky, and finishing only in the second half of April 2023, although the entire playthrough took a little less than 17 hours in total. And even those 17 hours perhaps took that long probably because I'm not a very smart guy to solve such puzzles. So if you are new to gaming and are looking for an easy-to-learn game, and 17 hours seem like a long time to you, do not worry, maybe in your playthrough everything would go faster. And now, let's move on to the game. In short, Neighbours From Hell is a puzzle game stylized as a TV show in which we, playing as a young man Woody, secretly sneak into the house of the embittered neighbor and quietly arrange a series of pranks, ranging from relatively harmless ones to some serious detriment that can damage both the neighbor's property and himself as well. What motivates such Woody's behavior? Well, according to the description from the developers and the trailer of the game, everything is quite simple. Woody just lived and tried to enjoy life, while his unpleasant neighbor, along with his family and pets, constantly kept on worsening Woody's living conditions with his thoughtless, careless, and borderline barbaric actions. Eventually, Woody got tired of putting up with all of this and decided to take some proper revenge, preliminary making a phone call to television and organizing everything as a reality show with pranks. But considering the overall atmosphere and presentation of the game, stylized as a cartoon, all the revenge happening on the screen isn't perceived as something serious or grim, and is more reminiscent of series like Tom and Jerry or Oh Just You Wait. This entire process, according to the game's lore, is filmed on hidden cameras and broadcasted to a live audience, which periodically reacts with laughter to the main character's dirty tricks, which not only adds an even more frivolous and comedic tone to what's happening, but also gives an assessment of players' actions, based on the neighbor's reactions to certain pranks. That is, how much damage he receives and how angry he gets, which determines the success of completing certain episodes. The higher the percentage, the closer to the ideal. Well, and since the cameras are hidden ones, the neighbor, of course, does not suspect a thing, and one of the main mechanics of the game is to avoid catching the eye of the neighbor, starting from hiding in other rooms or closets or under the bed to silently sneaking past his pets so that they don't raise the alarm. Because if you would be seen by the neighbor, Woody will be immediately very badly beaten, and a certain episode of the TV show will be considered as failed, and you'll have to start over. Yes, you got it right, there are no saves in the game. You either complete a level in one take perfectly, or you're content with a small percentage of the approval rating from the viewers. A very low percentage blocks access to the next episodes, while not high enough, although allows you to continue playing, but at the end of a season, the show is denied the opportunity to receive the most prestigious TV award. The receiving of the award actually doesn't affect anything at all, well, except perhaps your self-esteem. So you can complete the game by getting only 94 or 97% for each episode. But considering that the game is classified as a puzzle and therefore is intellectual, then the maximum percentage could mean how well does your head work, so to speak. Which, as I already said, increases self-esteem and increases the amount of pleasant emotions received from the game, especially if you didn't give up in the process and didn't look for playthrough prompts and clues on the internet. Regarding the main gameplay mechanics, everything is quite simple. Each episode, you sneak into your neighbor's house, look for and collect items that can be useful in pranks, and see what your neighbor is doing that day. After that, having learned his schedule for the day in the form of a rather cyclical route around the house, you begin to set traps and do other dirty tricks. And here's where the simplicity ends. It's important not only to prank and anger your neighbor, but also to do it with a whole series of events, because if his anger scale decreases or becomes empty before he falls into the next trap, then his rage will be significantly lower, and therefore you will receive a lower percentage of approval from the audience. One of the effective tactics in the first seasons of the TV show is to create an endless series of traps, so that the neighbor's anger scale simply doesn't have time to go out, causing more and more overloads of his psyche. The more overloads, the more percents per episode you will receive. But sometimes it works in a different way, which you may realize far from straight away, and you'll have to use another approach, which involves taking pauses between outbursts of rage. In my case, this was found out only through a lot of trial and error, and please excuse me by seeking help with playthrough from YouTube and comparing my walkthrough of some levels with how other people did it, just to understand why I couldn't get the highest rating. Yes, I know that this is cheating to some degree, and it means that I simply gave up. But in my defense, I'll only say that I did this only a couple of times, and this is only my 9th fully completed game, and even more so, the first puzzle. And since I made use of such prompts, I firmly decided for myself that I will play the rest of the levels and get 100% exclusively on my own, because in some sense it is a matter of honor. And by the way, the final level of the last season, which obviously is the most difficult, I completed and got 100% on my own. So maybe I'm not as stupid as it seemed. Returning to the topic of counterintuitive mechanics, I'll say that in the game you'll have to use intentional disruption of the stealth mode, because it turns out that you don't always need to actually sneak past pets, and sometimes you need to wake and stir them up, so that they would make a fuss and attract the neighbor's attention, who will have to immediately break his usual cycle and rush through the entire house to his pet. Such tactics help redirect the neighbor's attention and even buy yourself some time. And since I mentioned time, it's worth discussing some of the game's issues. The main problems are the somewhat outdated game controls and animation timings. Here's the thing, sometimes you won't be able to select an item from the inventory and use it correctly and quickly, just because you could accidentally miss the right pixel, and because of that, the needed action simply refuses to be executed. And on top of this, fixed-time game animations are imposed, because if you spend an extra second or two on performing the needed action while the neighbor is approaching the room where you are in, then you may simply have no time to run away or do a dirty trick, which may either interrupt the series of neighbors' outbursts of anger or lead to failing a level, because you will get caught by the neighbor and be beaten. Both outcomes can result in another attempt to play through the level, except in the latter case you'll be sent to the next try right away, and in the first case you'll find out about the failure only at the very end of the episode, when you receive a not high enough rating from the viewers. I'm serious, there were cases where between 97 and 100% of rating, the difference was only 1 second of performing actions, although the order of tricks and tactics on a level were absolutely the same. According to the famous quote, insanity is repeating the same thing over and over, hoping for a different result. But in the case of this game, 1 or 2 seconds of delay with the same set of actions actually can give a different result. But, despite some problems with unsuccessful clicking on the screen, the game is controlled quite easily and doesn't require any special skills or reaction. Especially since at the very beginning you'll be offered a short and easy-to-learn training, which will be supervised by either the TV channel producer or the show director himself. Well, he sure does look like your local alcoholic, but who knows, maybe he started drinking because of the same unbearable neighbors as Woody has. And to finish the topic of issues, I'll answer the obvious question. Are there any other minor nuances? And does anything there need to be fixed? Well, actually, not at all, if you can imagine it. And that's considering the game's age. At least in the GOG version, I didn't bump into any problems. Except that at first I had to find a way to record footages for this video. Yes, the game is in quite low resolution, and due to this, the mouse speed may seem too fast to you. But, as I already said, the game doesn't require any special skills, and therefore you can try to not pay attention to this. And now let's talk about the visual and sound components of the game. Graphically, the game is stylized as a rather pleasant 3D cartoon, sometimes reminiscent of stop-motion claymation, like Wallace and Gromit, and the low amount of frames per second only reinforces this effect. I can't say that the low frame rate is something pleasant, because usually this kind of thing annoys me, but considering the competent cartoon-like stylization, namely how the characters move, abiding by the base rules of cartoon animation, then this doesn't cause irritation. animation? Well, here it's worth mentioning that the game itself is not three-dimensional, but only uses pre-made images of 3D objects, in order to achieve two goals at once: to preserve the animation style and rendering quality, and also to be able to run on any, even a weak PC of those years. Regarding the music and sound design, everything is also pretty good. The soundtrack is presented as a pleasant, soft swing jazz, which periodically changes the mood, depending on situation in the game. And the sound effects authentically fit into the overall cartoonishness and frivolity of what's happening, adding integrity to the game and reinforcing its relaxed atmosphere. The left track alone is worth something. Well, it's quite hackneyed and probably already heard by you many times somewhere else, but here it doesn't count as a flaw. Actually, that's practically all I can say about the atmosphere. The game is pleasant and cozy, and it provided me personally with that needed relatively relaxing effect, which was so essential after completing and producing the video for Stalker Clear Sky. But here it's worth mentioning that even despite the overall relaxed atmosphere of the game, it caused me stress and heart palpitations every now and then, because let me remind you, through the whole game you're faced with at least two stress-inducing tasks: to not be seen by the neighbor and to manage to perform all actions in a limited time, which is also subject to the strict animation timings. Perhaps it's my personal perception that it's play here, because I myself unfortunately have a number of mental illnesses and stress almost never leaves me in life. But this doesn't change the fact that the game itself is quite pleasant and can cause a number of positive emotions. Of course, this isn't a masterpiece of game design and you won't be able to go beyond the game's rules, but on some particular levels and taking into account their conditions and the tools available to you there, you can let in a little variability in the ways of your playthrough, because there could be items that can be used in a limited number of times, as well as opportunities to at least slightly change the behavior and sequence of the neighbor's actions. Yes, all these opportunities are limited, and your main goal is still to solve the puzzle in the most effective way, but the game doesn't position itself as something more than a puzzle. But of course, if you're a child or a teenager, then any, even a such video game would seem like something more to you. At least that's how it was for me and for my friend, who, unlike me, managed to play and finish both this game and its sequel in the timely period, back in the 2000s. All that was left for me was to casually click through some levels without much success in advance into the next seasons of the TV show, smack my lips at the disc of the sequel, which my friend owned, and constantly getting distracted by much more impressive 3D games that seemed more adult and more worthy of attention. But years later, I don't regret completing it, especially since, as I already said, the game is quite pleasant and cozy, and that's without making allowances for my age and the age of the game itself. But what I do regret is that I didn't complete it back then, in childhood and adolescence, because perhaps it would have given me not only pleasant emotions back then, but also feeling of self-confidence and self-respect, because hey, I mastered the puzzle 100% and brought it all to completion. But at least now I have closed this gestalt. But is there anything else I can add in the end? Nope, because I've already said enough and made it clear that the game is good, just get on with it and play it yourself. But in case if the age scares you off, you could try the recently released remaster of the game, combining both parts into one, called Neighbours From Hell. But I personally haven't played this version yet, and I heard that the original installments were allegedly censored, and even some levels were cut. Therefore, try it at your own risk. But I can vouch for the original game for sure, at least for the first one. But what I cannot vouch for, alas, is the quality of my future reviews and the quality of editing, because starting with this video and apparently in the future, the reviews will no longer be long and overly detailed, and I have a lot of reasons for this, which I need to explain. As you have already noticed throughout this video, I mentioned Stalker Clear Sky several times, the video of which became my first game review and first issue of this diary. Here's the thing. First of all, producing the review of Stalker Clear Sky took me too much time, effort and nerves, because I started it back in February 2021 and finished it only in November 2024, due to which I burned out many times and very badly, and didn't even want to finish translating the video into the other two languages or even publish what was already ready. I just wanted to give up everything and stop existing. And secondly, because of the same bitter experience of producing the first review, I changed the approach to recording game footages, because of which now I have several times less of video material, which will decrease both the quality and detail of the editing and the possible runtime of future videos. So I ask you to excuse me, and I hope for your understanding. Thank you all for watching, and I wish you a nice day. Peace to everyone.